G'day guys and welcome, my name's Michael and I am the DeadAussieGamer, here to share with you my tips, tricks, ideas and strategies for playing and running tabletop role-playing games. Welcome to Encounters, where I break down various monsters, traps, and things, I guess, that we can then build into our own encounters. I basically use all the techniques that I use for designing a story and share it with you guys at home. This idea for the series came from my Discord channel, and so did the topic. So if you guys have suggestions and you want to see me continue making videos like this, again, my channel is all about giving you guys what you want. Just let me know in the comments below, and if you have a different topic, let me know that as well. Okay. Now, while America is preparing, of course, for the festive season of Thanksgiving, in Australia it is beating down with a radiating hot sun, melting my Halloween decorations. So while they are still living with a little bit of life in them, I'm going to be doing a horror-based werebeast encounter. So, first of all, one caveat. I do not call them lycanthropes. The reason I don't call them lycanthropes is because if I get lycanthrope into my mind, I always go for these guys, right? The werewolves. Werewolves are classic. Werewolves are timeless. Werewolves are very easily recognizable. But you know what? In a role-playing game, there are so many different types of werebeasts. There's wereboars, weretigers, werebears, weresharks. You know, be creative with it. You know, werebeast. Just go with that. Alternatively, if you feel a bit more creative, you can use the word zoanthrope, or you can use the word entothrope, if you wish to use a different variety of words. But I digress. The first thing I look at whenever I look at particularly monster encounters is, what is this story origin? What is the tale that needs to be told when looking at this particular monster? For werebeasts in particular, it's the idea that civilization is not as safe as we like to think it is. It shows that even though we emerged from the forests, using light to fight off the darkness, staying in large communities in order to try and protect ourselves, even building walls and roofs and houses just to protect ourselves from the elements, werebeasts lurk. Werebeasts challenge the safety. Anyone could be a werebeast. Your neighbor, your family member. And they could arrive and attack at any time. And even in the middle of an entire city, a werebeast attack is not going to be an uncommon thing. So, that is the nature of the savagery behind these creatures. So, once I look at the origin, I look at how to harness it. Werebeasts have two very major methods of encounters. Versus the wilds and versus the hunger. Now, versing the wild is all about breaking the idea of safety. In a game I'm currently running, I have a group of people who have just arrived at a town called Undorno. It's in the throes of a massive festival which they hold yearly called the Festival of the White Stag, where they go and they hunt for a mythical white stag. It's not real, it's more of a touristy trap thing. There's a lot of camp little games, there's a whole bunch of tourists who have come in, many of which who are adventurers at very low levels, trying to, you know, make a name for themselves. And of course there's a big feast and festival and that whole thing. Now, this idea of safety is built first. We foreshadow the idea that in the midst of this wide and haunted forest, is an oasis. It's a safe place. A place where games are being played and children run in the streets. Yeah, sure, you get told don't go into the woods at night, but that's more for things like, don't fall into a ditch or don't get eaten by a wolf, But the idea of these other creatures, the werebeasts, ooh, now that's tantalizing. Once we have once we've established the safety of the place, that's when we start to challenge it with the foreshadowing. The foreshadowing usually can come in the case of a murder, it can come in the case of livestock being slaughtered, but it is some form of attack, and the throwaway is that it seems like an animal attack. Let's take, for example, a wereboar, because we don't often, werewolf is easy. Werewolf is, oh look, something's been mauled by a wolf. What about a wereboar? What if, for a wereboar encounter, instead of, the foreshadowing being a dead livestock thing, what if a hunter, searching for a wild boar for the festival, comes upon a very prized creature, and during the hunt is savaged by a particular boar, one that he thinks stands upright like a man? Not only does it knock him off his horse, it takes hold of his bow, snaps it in twain, and basically chases him away from the area. Now, straight away, you get the image of, wow, okay, cool, this is a were creature in there. You could also think, well, maybe there's a lunatic in the forests wearing a pig mask and wielding samurai swords or something. For those of you who watch anime, you know what I mean. Whatever it is, that foreshadowing is where you want to lure people in. You want to lure people into this idea of, we need to hunt down and find whatever it is causing this trouble and remove it. Because otherwise, the civilization, it's going to be in danger, right? That's how it works. However, then, of course, we go to the hunt, which I'll talk about later. Next is versus the hunger. Now, sometimes we like to think that the werewolf encounter can be something that the NPCs deal with, right? It's another monster, it's another creature. But what happens when we turn that inwards? What if the group is attacked and they think the attack comes at the hand of a standard everyday tiger? But it turns out that the tiger was actually a were-tiger, and one of the party members is slowly being corrupted. Well, this then looks at the encounter turning into something called the hunger, where you need to build and establish this idea that the player is losing some sense of themselves. They're kind of succumbing to more primal instincts. And if you pardon the French, the three basic things is you need to feed, you need to fight, and of course you need to do the other F word. Now, those three things, motivating the character, you can do that either by encouraging them, like you get to a situation, you find yourself incredibly ravenous, voracious even. The food in front of you seems absolutely tantalizing. You cannot help but just start ripping into it with your bare hands. You stop for a moment and you realize that your hands are covered in blood. There was no food on the table. In fact, there's no food laid out at all. What happened? Why is there blood on your hands? Suddenly you've started manipulating their reality. What is real? What is, kind of an illusion? What's happening to this character? The idea of the voracious appetites of the flesh, that you really want to clear with the group before you leap into that. Sure, wake up in a stranger's bed. The stranger thanks you for a wonderful night. They describe your lovemaking as you being like a wild animal. These are things that allow the character to kind of explore that notion of savagery. It also leads them into this whole, like, I'm blacking out and I don't know what's happening. We see that in lots of werewolf movies and stuff, and it's no different when your players are experiencing a werewolf transformation. The hunt. Now, the hunt is the type of game you want to be building from this encounter. So now you've got the origin of, what you want to be building. You've got the foreshadowing of either the wilds or the hunger. Now you want to look at trying to find the culprit. Now, in the wilds version, you want to obviously be hunting the creature. So for this, you want to be looking at things like, well, okay, how do I track the creature? If I track the creature, then you want to design a path that the creature takes. Don't fall into the trap of designing the encounter ad lib and sort of going, cool, you enter the forest, random encounter, random encounter, random encounter, random encounter. Don't do that. Instead, pre-prepare and say, cool, this is the lair of the creature. This is where they live. This is where they do their thing. What do they do in an average day? They go over here, they drink at the pond. Once they drink at the pond, they go and hunt. Well, they usually hunt wild game, like, let's say deer. And this is the deer's breeding season. So this is the path that they normally take. So it would have some carcasses strewn out about here. Maybe there's a pack of predatory creatures, maybe a large bear, and there was a battle that ensued over some prize carcass that happened. So you actually see the blood trail. You initially think that maybe the creature is wounded, and you come across a large dead bear who has been torn to shreds. Now, and then all of a sudden, no bear comes up, and it's a werewolf bear or wereboar bear, depending on what you're doing. That'd be weird. That'd be cool, though. Anyway, I digress. The hunt becomes interesting when you're following a trail and piecing together the story of what the creature is doing. Simply having a series of random encounters that lead you to your end result is going to always have a less of an impact than if you've put some thought and effort into the actual trail that they're leaving. Now, the hunting for the hunger thing. Now, there are many ways that one can learn about and combat the idea of being a were creature. Now, the first step is obviously identifying that you're a were creature. Easiest way to do this? Knowledge. Have them either being tied up, being observed, or even have a noteworthy werewolf hunter or werebeast hunter show up and be able to explain the situation, and that they need to go and find and kill the alpha before the next full moon, yada, yada, yada. The hunt then begins for this alpha to find the cure, or even to hunt down and find a medicinal cure. Wolfsbane, for example, is a common cure for lycanthropy, so maybe something similar was what your characters are looking for. The pursuit of this then needs to be hindered, and this is the important thing. That's the difference between the versus the wild and versing hunger. Versing the wild is you hunting an animal. Versing the hunger is you racing against time, right? Because the longer that you wait, the longer that time passes, the more that savagery begins to eat away at that character. And as it does so, they become a compromised position in the group. Now, you don't want to ever get to the position where they're like, cool, we're going to lock you into a room, leave you here while we go do the quest. That'll be bad. If they do that, always have the character break out somehow. Maybe the character transforms, they break out, they roleplay as the fully formed lichen or were creature there. You could do that. Alternatively, however, what you want to be doing is you want to be giving them an option to suppress their urges. Have that moment where the character goes, okay, cool, what's your will save? Awesome, let me just roll it. Your eyes turn into these, giant animal-like eyes. Fur begins to grow over your ears, and suddenly you sort of shake your head and the fur retracts, your eyes return to normal. You feel like you've got this thing under control. You feel like you've got it under control for at least a few hours. Giving the players that kind of knowledge allows them to build up that trust, that you as a GM are not just going to spring and to give a full transformation, which is part of it. Yes, you shouldn't randomly spring the trap, but, don't mislead them entirely and say, oh yeah, no, I'd never turn them into a were creature and, turn them into one of the main baddies randomly. No, wouldn't do that. Because yes, you would. I would. All right, so that's the hunt. Now, the red herrings. Now, I know red herring's not the right word for the first one, so I'm just going to say it's not a red herring, but it's like a twist, I guess, plot twist, is when the hunt is reversed. When the group starts to become the ones being hunted. Now, in the Versus the Wild one, we saw our heroes trying to go and find and track down this were creature in order to stop it or to, bring it to an end. What happens if that trail that I mentioned, when you're setting up the trail, you're following the day in the life of the were creature, what if that was a construct that the creature had put into place in order to lure those it knew, the people that it knew were hunting it, out into the open and set off an ambush? Because the thing is were creatures are a hybrid. They're a mix of both worlds. They're both savage, but cunning enough to be able to do things like set up traps, lay an ambush, lure people into a cave, and then have them bottlenecked. These tactics are not uncommon and, could definitely lead to a very interesting encounter should your players play very, I suppose, loudly. If the were creature has no reason to suspect there are hunters nearby, then it shouldn't be doing that sort of stuff. But if the PCs have been running around town, claiming werewolf, then, yeah, okay, maybe it's picked up what they're onto and is prepared for them. The second type, obviously the versus the hunger, is that, obviously while you're chasing this one, instead of the creature setting up an ambush and trying to repel the hostiles, maybe it's trying to tempt one of the other players. Maybe it's trying to tempt the one transforming, try and bring it into the pact. Maybe it injures some of the other players so that they're bleeding but not dying. A sudden spring attack. The animal bites onto the arm. Your arm is bleeding. You get it bandaged up. The bandage holds, but there's this smell of blood now in the air, fresh. Their heart's starting to beat and race. The longer that they travel with this injured individual. These things are really great ways to kind of boost up and sort of reverse the role of the hunter. And that's a common thing that you want to do in these sorts of encounters. Now, going to red herrings. There are 3 types of red herrings that I've always said are fantastic for were creature encounters. The first one is that it's not a were creature. Easy. It's a lunatic. It's some guy with a mask who is doing stuff to frame were creatures. Because were creatures are scary, and normally you'll find that people will steer right clear of people who, claim that there are werewolves in the woods. Don't go in the woods then. Yeah. The second is what's called a therianthrope. Now, a therianthrope isn't a person who has transformed into a animal-like creature. It is an animal who has the ability to turn into a human. Creatures such as the winter wolves, the jackalwares, these are the types of creatures that have that ability. And what the difference between them, I suppose, is that you get to see a visceral animal side to a human being, or a whatever race they happen to be. So, say for example, we have a were-tiger that turns into an elf. This elf goes into a butcher shop and without any cause or thought will just reach into the counter and just start chewing on some raw meat. While it is an elf doing it, it's still kind of an animal, and it behaves like an animal, just in the form of a person. So it's a very interesting twist, as well as a good red herring, if it's a therianthrope as opposed to being a were creature. Because you can somewhat shoo the therianthropes away, because they're basically animals. The last red herring that you want to use, and I don't like using this one very often because I feel like I play in so many games that involve people who play anthropomorphized races, such as the Tengu or the Catfolk or, the Rougarou, the Ratfolk, whatever. These are easy victims of misidentification as were creatures. But I feel like that's probably the most expected red herring so far. So if you do find yourself in that scenario, I think an interesting twist on that is if someone is claiming to be a anthropomorphized race, like for example a were-boar is claiming to be a boar folk. That's interesting because it's like, well, yeah, I'm a boar folk. I've always been a boar folk, but it turns out he's actually a were-boar. Those are interesting. I don't really have a good what do you do with that story? Usually the best type of NPCs, if you want to do it that way, are the kinds that will then give the group information about were creatures. In that game I was mentioning about the festival with the safe town, I do have a were-bear that lives in town as well. And while they know that they know for certain this individual isn't responsible for the were creature attacks, they have gone to this person and said, hey, we'll protect your identity, but you need to help us catch this thing. And that was the trade-off. So it's a really cool encounter. It's a really interesting way to run the were creatures. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, of course, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Go check us out on all of the different things, descriptions in below, and share this video around. Let people know about it. And if you want me to do an encounter of a different monster or a dungeon or something, let me know. And again, I'll make videos. Till next time, guys, as always, game hard or die trying. Bye, guys.